Let us know in the comments what city you're tuning in from tonight. We love hearing where our listeners are listening from. Now, imagine this. You're working late in a quiet library, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. You're surrounded by old police files, yellow paper, black ink, the smell of dust and time. And then you open one report that shouldn't exist, because it's about you. Here's her story.
My name is Claire Morrison. At least, I've always believed that's who I am. I'm 27 years old, a graduate student in criminology at Northfield University. For my thesis, I've been studying the patterns of missing persons cases across small towns in the early 2000s, how some vanish completely, how others quietly reappear years later with no explanation. It's grim work, but I've always been fascinated by how ordinary lives can disappear into paperwork. 3 months ago, I started visiting the county archives in Ridgefield, a quiet town about an hour from campus. The place was barely staffed. Just me, an old clerk named Dawn, and endless rows of files. The lights hummed. The floor creaked. Most days, it felt like the world outside had forgotten us. That night, the night everything changed, I was alone in the back room, reading through a folder labeled Unresolved, 2004 to 2006. I remember the smell of old paper and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I flipped through one after another. Jane Doe, unidentified remains, runaway teens. Until I found one that made my stomach turn. It was titled Disappearance Report, Claire Morrison. At first, I thought it was some kind of coincidence. I even laughed a little. Weird, I said out loud to no one. But then I saw the details. Female, Caucasian. Height, 5 feet 6 inches. Brown hair, blue eyes. Birth date, March 17th, 1998. That's my birthday. Every single detail was mine. The report said I was last seen leaving a summer camp near Crescent Lake on July 12th, 2004. Missing. Presumed abducted. There was a photo attached, slightly blurred, printed from an old disposable camera. The girl in that picture looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same smile, but she was maybe 8 years old. I remember just staring at that photo, my hands shaking a little. My first thought was that someone was playing a joke, maybe Don, the archivist. But when I asked him, he just frowned. He'd never seen the file before. He even checked the database. No digital record of it existed, no barcode, no indexing number, nothing. Where did you find this? He asked. In box 47B, I told him. He looked confused. There is no box 47B, he said. That was when something cold ran down my spine. I left soon after. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning. But when I came back the next day, the box was gone. Completely. The file, the photograph, everything. Don said he'd checked the logs. There was no record of me signing it out. No evidence it had ever existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the photo I'd secretly snapped on my phone before leaving the archive. The little girl's smile, my smile, felt like a mirror from another lifetime. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of the photo, behind the girl, was a shadow of a person. A man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. His face partly turned away, but his hand resting on the girl's shoulder. I zoomed in, but the photo started to blur. Still, one detail stood out clear as day. The man was wearing a silver watch, and I swear it looked exactly like the one my father still wears. I didn't mention the file to anyone for a few days. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a clerical error, maybe some old, unsolved case with a similar name. But every time I looked at that photo on my phone, I couldn't stop thinking about the man's watch. It wasn't just similar to my father's. It was identical. Same silver casing, same dark leather strap, even a small scratch under the number 6 that I'd always noticed as a child. My father, Daniel Morrison, was a high school math teacher in our hometown of Auburn Falls. He'd worn that watch since I was little. It had been a gift from my late mother before she died in a car accident when I was 9. I didn't want to believe it, that he might somehow be in that photograph. But the thought wouldn't leave my mind. That weekend, I drove back home. The drive took 3 hours, and the whole way there, I rehearsed what I'd say. Something casual, something that wouldn't sound like an accusation. When I arrived, he was in the backyard, raking leaves. The November air was cool and still. He smiled when he saw me, just like he always did, and hugged me tight. It was strange, that warmth, because in that moment, all I could think about was the blurred figure in the photo, his hand resting on that little girl's shoulder. Over dinner, we talked about ordinary things: work, bills, the neighbor's new dog. I almost convinced myself to drop it entirely, but then I saw the watch on his wrist, glinting under the kitchen light, and I couldn't hold it back. "Dad," I said, trying to sound calm, "do you remember a place called Crescent Lake?" He looked up from his plate, his fork paused in midair. "Crescent Lake," he repeated. "Yeah. It was mentioned in an old file I found for my research." He smiled faintly. "That's up north, right? We used to go there when you were little. Camping trips." I nodded. "Yeah, I thought so." Then I showed him the photo on my phone. The second he saw it, the color drained from his face. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared, his jaw tightening. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "It wasn't a file," I said. "A missing persons report from 2004 for a girl named Claire Morrison." He didn't look away from the screen. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked to the sink, turning his back to me. I heard the faint sound of him breathing, slow, steady, like he was holding something back. "Claire," he said finally, still facing the window. "Some things from the past, you don't need to dig them up." My heart started pounding. "What does that mean?" He turned to me then, his face completely still. "It means not every file you find in some dusty cabinet has to make sense." "Dad, that's you in the photo." He didn't answer. He just looked at me a long, unreadable stare, and then he said, "It's late. You should get some sleep." That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom. The walls were covered in old posters, the same ones I'd had before college. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Around 2 a.m., I got up for water. Passing my father's room, I noticed the light still on. The door was open just an inch, and I heard something, the faint crackle of a lighter, then his voice, low and tired. I peeked through the gap. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding an old shoebox in his lap. Inside were photographs, papers, and something metallic glinting in the lamplight. I stepped back before he could see me. The next morning, when I came downstairs, he was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. The shoebox was nowhere in sight. But on the kitchen table, there was a single photograph, face down. When I turned it over, my stomach dropped. It was me or the little girl who looked like me standing in front of a cabin by the lake. And this time, there was no man behind her. Just one word, written in pen on the back. Found. I didn't go back to campus right away. I couldn't. The photo on the table, the one marked found, felt like a message, but I didn't understand what it meant. That morning, I sat in my car outside my childhood home for nearly an hour, staring at the house. The curtains in the living room were drawn, the front door locked. My father's car was still gone. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he left early for work. Maybe it was all coincidence. But deep down, something felt broken. Around noon, I finally drove to the Ridgefield archives again. Don, the archivist, was there, half asleep at his desk. He perked up when he saw me. "Back again already?" he asked. "Yeah, I need to find something." He frowned when I mentioned the file again. "You sure you didn't mix up the box number?" "I'm sure," I said. 47B. He sighed and motioned toward the back. "You can check, but that section's been cleared for years. Mold damage." I walked down the narrow aisle toward the back room. The air was colder there, and the light from the flickering bulbs barely reached the far shelves. Where box 47B should have been, there was an empty space, but taped to the metal shelf was a single label. It said property removed, author unknown. I stared at it for a long time. When I went back to Don to ask who author unknown might refer to, he was gone. His jacket was still on the chair, his coffee still steaming. But he wasn't there. That's when my phone buzzed. A new message. No number. just unknown. It was a photo, the same cabin by the lake, but this time I was standing in front of it, as I am now, 27 years old. I dropped my phone. For a second, I thought maybe it was an old picture I'd forgotten about, but then I noticed the details. The same clothes I was wearing today, the same jacket, same scarf, even the same car visible in the background. Someone had taken that photo less than an hour ago. I ran outside. The parking lot was empty except for my car and one white pickup parked near the exit. No one inside. I didn't think. I just got in my car and drove. For hours, I followed the old highway toward the north. The whole way, I kept replaying the word written on that first photo found. By sunset, I saw the road sign for Crescent Lake. The trees opened up to reveal the water, dark, still, surrounded by cabins half hidden under the fog. Most looked abandoned, except for one. A single cabin had smoke rising from its chimney, the same one from the photos. I parked, stepped out slowly. The air smelled of pine and cold wood smoke. As I got closer, I saw something lying on the porch, a child's toy, half buried in the dirt. A small stuffed rabbit with one eye missing. I picked it up. It was damp from the morning dew. Then I heard it, a door creak. The cabin door was slightly open. Light flickered inside. And from somewhere deep within, a voice, faint, trembling, whispered my name, Claire. The voice was soft, almost like a breath, so quiet I couldn't tell if it came from inside the cabin or from somewhere behind me. I froze. My hands were shaking, the cold stuffed rabbit still in my grip. The forest around me was completely still. No wind, no insects, no sound except the faint creak of the open door. Then I heard it again. Claire. It was a woman's voice this time. Calm. Familiar in a way I couldn't place. I took a step forward. The wooden porch groaned under my shoes. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. The interior was dim, lit by a single oil lamp on a small table. The walls were lined with photos. Hundreds of them. Most were of me. Different ages, school photos, candid shots, even a few I'd taken myself in college. Pictures I'd never posted anywhere. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I reached for one on the wall. A photo of me as a teenager, maybe 16, sitting on the hood of my father's car. Someone had written in the corner with red ink, Year 11. On the table beneath the lamp was a small recorder, the old cassette kind, and a stack of police reports, all with my name. I pressed the play button. There was a click, and then the same woman's voice spoke, the one that had called my name. If you're hearing this, she said, it means you've found the cabin. It means you've remembered. I stood there, frozen. My heart was racing. I don't know how much he told you, the voice continued, but none of it was real. Not your name, not your records, not your childhood. You were part of the project. You were never supposed to know. I stopped the tape. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep hold of the recorder. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun around. Someone was standing in the doorway. The light from outside fell across his face, and my breath caught in my chest. It was my father. He looked exhausted, his face pale, his eyes sunken. He didn't look surprised to see me. Claire, he said quietly, stepping inside. You weren't supposed to find this place. I felt my throat tighten. What is this? What project? He shook his head. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. He sighed, set something down on the table. That same shoebox I'd seen him holding the other night. Inside were more photographs. All of the children. All of them with names scratched out, except one. Claire Morrison. He looked at me then, and his voice broke slightly. You were one of 7. The cabin was silent, except for the faint hiss of the oil lamp and the distant ripple of the lake outside. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my body trembling, but I forced myself to stay. My father, Daniel Morrison, stood near the table, his hands pressed flat against the wooden surface, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked older than I remembered, gaunt in a way that made him almost unrecognizable. The man I had grown up calling Dad was here, but somehow not entirely. You need to understand something, he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. What you think your life has been, it's only half the story. The rest was taken from you. I felt my stomach twist. Taken from me? What does that mean? Dad, what are you talking about? He took a deep breath, rubbing his temples with one hand. You weren't supposed to remember. Not fully. Not yet. You were part of something called Project Lumen. A study. An experiment. When you were 8 years old, you were enrolled without knowing it. It was supposed to help children like you, in theory. In practice, it was far more complicated than we ever imagined. I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My hands tightened around the stuffed rabbit, pressing it into my chest like a lifeline. You were part of 7 children, he continued, voice barely above a whisper. All of you had certain abilities, patterns in behavior, memory retention, things that could be measured and controlled. The organization, I wasn't just a father. I was part of it. I had to help. I had to guide it from the inside. I never imagined it would come back to haunt me like this. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. 7 children. Patterns. Abilities. I whispered, voice cracking. Dad, are you saying I wasn't supposed to grow up normally? That my life was fake? He shook his head. Not fake. Altered. Observed. We tried to protect you in the best way we knew, but everything had a purpose. Even your forgetfulness. You were supposed to forget. The reports, the photographs, the files, they were meant to be sealed, never found. But someone else in the project, they broke protocol. They left traces. That's why you found the archive files, the photo marked found. That's why you were drawn back here. I leaned back, staring at the cabin walls, my head spinning. The photographs lining the walls seemed to stare back at me, each one a silent accusation. My own face appeared again and again, frozen at ages I didn't remember living. You think this is a story? I said finally, my voice trembling, like some old case file or a conspiracy. But it's my life, my childhood, my memories. He stepped closer, eyes heavy with something between guilt and fear. Claire, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to know. Not like this. You weren't supposed to discover it until years later, when you could process it. I kept you safe, even if I had to lie to do it. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to steady my thoughts. Safe? Safe doesn't mean hiding the truth from your own daughter. Safe doesn't mean leaving me with a photo and a note that says, found. Safe doesn't mean pretending my life is this. He flinched at my words, but said nothing. Instead, he motioned toward the shoebox on the table. You need to see this. You need to understand what happened before you can really know who you are. I hesitated, but stepped forward. I opened the box carefully. Inside were files, each labeled with a child's name. Medical records, school reports, even video recordings on old camcorder tapes. One file was thicker than the others. Claire Morrison. My file. I opened it. My childhood. All of it. Written down in meticulous detail. My milestones, my fears, my dreams. Everything observed, measured, categorized. Notes about my reactions to stress, to joy, to pain. Some notes were so specific it was like the person had been inside my head. At the bottom of the box was an envelope. Inside, a single piece of paper, a photograph of me at 8 years old, the same photo from the archive. But in this one, the man behind me was fully visible. My father. The same silver watch glinting under the light, and scribbled across the back in neat handwriting. Protect her, until she can know. I felt my hand shake. Protect her? I whispered. All this time it was you? He nodded. Yes, but not entirely. There were others. People with power. People who wanted the study to succeed at any cost. Some of them wanted to use you. Others wanted to control the narrative. I had to shield you. And somehow you remembered. Found. You've been finding your way back to the truth all on your own. I sank into a chair, staring at the wall of photos. And the others? The other children? They're out there, he said quietly. Some found safe. Some lost. The project ended years ago, but the traces remain. And now you've stumbled back into the web. You need to be careful. People still watch. People still track. That's why the files, the photos, everything, it resurfaced. I press my hands into my face. I don't understand. Why me? Why now? Because you've always had the ability to see patterns, he said, to notice the traces they left. That's why they couldn't leave you entirely alone. They underestimated you. I felt a chill run through me. Not just the cold air of the cabin, but something heavier. The weight of a life I didn't remember living fully, yet somehow still recognized. And now, he said, his voice trembling, you have a choice. You can walk away. Pretend you never found this. Pretend the past isn't real. Or you can follow it. Piece it together. Find the other children. Discover what they did and who they really are. I looked at him, and for the first time, I realized something terrifying. My life, everything I thought I knew, was only a fraction of the story. The rest lay out there, waiting for me to find it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My mind spun with every possibility, every danger, every unanswered question. And then I knew I couldn't turn back. Not now. Not ever. Because the cabin, the photograph, the files, they weren't just relics of the past. They were a map, and I had no choice but to follow it. The door handle rattled slowly, methodically, like a metronome counting down my last moments of calm. My father's grip on my wrist was firm, almost desperate, and I could feel the tension radiating from him like electricity. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to scream, to fight, but I stayed frozen, knowing it wouldn't help. Claire, my father whispered, stay close to me. Don't make a sound. I nodded, barely breathing. The shadows from the oil lamp danced across the cabin walls, twisting the photographs into faces that seemed to leer at me. The air was thick and heavy, almost tangible, pressing down on my chest with each inhale. I could hear the faint crunch of gravel outside the porch, the soft murmur of voices, low and almost indistinguishable, but unmistakably human. The handle turned again, more forcefully this time, and the door creaked open just a few inches. A flashlight beam pierced the darkness of the cabin, sweeping across the walls and glinting off the edges of the photographs. My heart thumped painfully against my ribcage, threatening to break free. A voice called out, calm, professional, chilling in its casual authority. Claire Morrison, it said, crisp and deliberate. We know you're in there. Come out. No one will get hurt if you cooperate. My father's hand tightened around mine. Do not answer, he hissed. The beam of light moved again, landing on my father first. I saw the faint outline of a firearm in the other person's hand, partially obscured by the flashlight. My father's face hardened. He grabbed my shoulders, almost shaking me in urgency. They can't know what we know, he said. If they see you panic, it's over. I forced myself to swallow. My voice caught somewhere between terror and disbelief. Who are they? He shook his head. Project Eden. They weren't done with us. They've never been done. Another shuffle outside. The van door slammed shut with a dull thud, and I could hear footsteps crunching through the underbrush toward the cabin. My father moved toward the back door, silently gesturing for me to follow. I hesitated, but the sound of the front door handle rattling again made my decision for me. We slipped through the small hallway, stepping lightly across the wooden floorboards, which groaned ominously under our weight. My mind raced. If we could reach the back, we might make it to the tree line. We might get away. But the rational part of me, the part trained by years of surviving minor crises on the road, knew it wasn't that simple. The front door creaked open fully, and a beam of light stabbed across the living room, illuminating the scattered photographs, the shoebox, the cassette player. The air smelled faintly of damp pine and gun oil. I caught a glimpse of a pair of boots, perfectly polished despite the forest dirt outside. Claire Morrison, a male voice barked. Step away from him. Now. I froze, feeling my father's arm tighten around mine. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a mixture of fear and determination. Go, he whispered. Now. Don't hesitate. I nodded, and we darted toward the back. My father kicked open the small kitchen door, revealing a narrow path between the cabin and the lake. The trees were dense, their branches low, scraping our arms and faces as we ran. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, punctuated by sharp commands. I tripped over a root, landing hard on the damp forest floor. Pain shot up my leg, but my father grabbed my hand and pulled me upright. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice tense but calm. We ran toward the water's edge, the forest giving way to the rocky shoreline. The van was visible now, parked at the far end of the clearing, its headlights sweeping across the trees like searching eyes. I could see shadows moving inside, figures scanning the forest, rifles in hand. "Claire," my father said, stopping for a moment behind a large boulder. He pointed to a small dock, half submerged and rotting with age. "We can use the dock. Jump in the lake. They'll hesitate to follow. It's our only chance." I swallowed, the cold fear making my stomach churn. The water looked black, impenetrable, and freezing just from the night air. "Dad, we could drown." He shook his head. "It's better than what they'll do if they catch us. Trust me." We sprinted the last few meters. My boots slipped on the wet wood, and I nearly fell, but my father grabbed my arm and steadied me. The dock creaked violently under our weight, threatening to give way at any second. I could hear the voices from the forest behind us, shouting, the beam of a flashlight swinging dangerously close. "Now," he shouted. We jumped. The icy water closed over me instantly, stealing my breath and numbing my body. Panic surged, but I kicked against it, following my father as we swam toward the far edge of the lake. Branches scratched our arms and faces, but the cold forced me to focus, to move, to survive. I surfaced briefly, gasping. My father was ahead, leading the way toward a small cove barely visible in the moonlight. I followed, every stroke a fight against the cold and my terror. Behind us, the shouts had stopped, but that didn't mean we were safe. We reached the shallow edge of the cove, pulling ourselves onto the wet ground. My legs trembled uncontrollably, and I sank to my knees, coughing and shivering. My father crouched beside me, scanning the lake behind us. "They won't give up," he said quietly. "They never do, but we've got a head start. We can disappear, for now." I tried to speak, but my voice caught. Finally, I whispered, "Who are they? Why me? Why now?" He looked at me, eyes heavy with guilt and exhaustion. "Because you remembered. They didn't expect that. You've always been stronger than they realized. That's why they came back. And that's why we can't stop now. We have to find the others before they find us." I looked around the cove. The night was quiet, eerily calm after the chaos. The cold seeped into my bones, but a new resolve began to grow inside me. I couldn't go back. I couldn't ignore what I discovered. Somewhere in the shadows, I knew the other 6 children were out there, like me, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across the country. And I had to find them, because if I didn't, Project Eden would continue to control us from the shadows. And I couldn't let that happen. The forest was silent now, too silent. But I didn't care. I had a mission, and I was ready to face whatever came next. We stayed by the lake until the sun began to rise, crouched behind the thick reeds, shivering and silent. My father kept his eyes fixed on the opposite shore, scanning for movement, for headlights, for anything. But the forest remained still, blanketed in fog that drifted over the water like smoke. When I could finally feel my hands again, I spoke, my voice hoarse from the cold. "Where do we go now?" He didn't answer right away. His face was gray and drawn, his breath visible in the chill morning air. "There's a storage shed near the old highway," he said finally. "I left supplies there years ago in case this ever happened." I stared at him. "You've been preparing for this?" He gave a bitter smile. "When you steal something from people like them, you don't ever stop preparing." We moved cautiously through the trees, avoiding the main trails. Every twig snap made me jump. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. My body was exhausted, but adrenaline kept me upright. After what felt like hours, we reached a narrow dirt road. On the other side stood a rusted shed, half covered in ivy. My father pushed the door open and ushered me inside. The smell of oil and metal hit me immediately. Old tools, gasoline, dust. Inside, he uncovered a small metal trunk from beneath a tarp. When he opened it, I saw maps, notebooks, and a stack of faded photos, the same kind of Polaroids I'd seen in the cabin. Only these weren't of me. There were 6 of them. 6 children. He spread them out on the floor, his hands shaking slightly. Each one was labeled the same way, a name, a year, and a number. Subject 01, Lucas Gray, 1997. Subject 02, Anna Rhodes, 1998. Subject 03, Miles Avery, 1998. Subject 05, Naomi Wells, 2000. Subject 06, Aaron Blake, 2000. Subject 07, Leah Chun, 2001. I stared at the faces, some smiling, some crying, some staring blankly into the camera. They all looked normal, ordinary, but behind their eyes, there was something else, a kind of stillness I couldn't describe. Where are they now? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Most of them vanished. Some right after I took you. They went into witness protection, or what passed for it. I only managed to keep track of one, Anna Rhodes. She was relocated to a small town in Oregon, changed her name, tried to build a life. I looked up at him. Then we go to her. He frowned. It's not that simple. If they're monitoring you, they're monitoring her too. If we make contact. She deserves to know, I said firmly. They all do. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You sound just like your mother. That word hit me like a stone. My mother? He froze, realizing what he'd said. I shouldn't have. No, y presa. You said I didn't have one. That everything was fabricated. He sat down on the floor, suddenly looking decades older. You did have one. The woman in charge of your conditioning, Dr. Evelyn Rhodes. She was the architect of Project Eden. She designed the protocols, the tests, the memories. But she grew attached to you. Too attached. When I took you, she didn't stop me. She covered for us. Then she disappeared. I felt the world tilt slightly. Rhodes. You mean Anna Rhodes? He looked up at me. Her daughter. For a second, I couldn't speak. The pieces clicked together too fast. The connection between the names, the dates, the strange familiarity I felt when I saw the photo labeled Anna Rhodes. She's out there, I said softly. Dr. Rhodes' daughter. One of the 7. He nodded slowly, and maybe the only one who knows what her mother was really doing. I stood up, pacing the shed. The light filtering through the cracks in the wall painted thin lines across the floor, slicing through the darkness like prison bars. We find her, I said, tonight. He didn't argue this time. He just packed the maps, the photos, and a few small cans of fuel into a duffel bag. By the time we reached the truck parked a few miles away, the sun was fully up, burning through the fog. The old engine coughed, but started on the 3rd try. We drove in silence for hours, the forest thinning into open road. I watched the landscape pass by, endless stretches of pines and telephone poles. My reflection in the window didn't even look like me anymore. At one point, my father reached over and turned on the radio, maybe out of habit. Static filled the air, then a faint voice broke through. A female news anchor. Local authorities are investigating an apparent fire outside Clearwater. No survivors have been confirmed. The property is believed to belong to retired government contractor Henry Morrison. He slammed the radio off. I stared at him. They burned it. His jaw tightened, to erase everything. The reports, the evidence, the tape. A chill ran through me. Then they know we're alive. He nodded, and they won't stop until we're not. For the rest of the drive, we didn't speak. My thoughts spun in circles, looping back to that one question. Why me? By nightfall, we reached a small gas station on the outskirts of a forgotten town, the kind of place with one pump and a flickering sign. My father parked behind the building and handed me a small piece of paper. It was an address, scrawled hastily, barely legible. Anna's last known location, he said. If she's still there, she'll know something. But you have to be careful. If they've already found her. He didn't finish. I stared at the address. The town name was faded, but I recognized it, Keller's Point, Oregon. The lights of the gas station buzzed faintly, insects circling in lazy patterns. The world felt smaller than ever. I folded the paper and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then we go to Keller's Point. He looked at me, his eyes tired but proud. You sure you're ready for what you'll find there? No, I admitted, but I need to know. Outside, the wind had picked up again, carrying the faint scent of smoke from somewhere far away. Maybe it was from a fire. Maybe it wasn't. But either way, I knew this was only the beginning. The drive to Keller's Point was long, winding through narrow highways flanked by dense forests. Twilight had settled over the landscape by the time we arrived, turning the pines into towering silhouettes that seemed to loom over us like silent sentinels. My father navigated the roads with quiet precision, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that I imagined the leather would creak under the pressure. I tried to calm myself. Every mile brought a mix of anticipation and dread, the kind that makes the stomach knot while your heart races at the same time. I kept thinking about Anna Rhodes, the first of the 7 children I would try to find, and the possibility that she had already disappeared again, swallowed by the same system that had haunted me my entire life. Finally, we rolled into Keller's Point. The town was small, bordering on sleepy, with a few scattered streetlights casting halos over cracked asphalt. There were no signs of life in the narrow streets. The air smelled faintly of salt and wood smoke. My father pulled the truck into a parking lot behind a diner that looked abandoned, its neon sign flickering weakly. This is as close as we get by vehicle, he said. We walk from here. I followed him down the cracked sidewalk, trying not to make any noise. Every shadow seemed alive, every window a pair of eyes waiting to report our presence. My father kept glancing over his shoulder. If anyone from Eden is in town, they'll be watching, he whispered. We reached a small, 2-story house at the far end of the street. According to the paper he had given me, this was Anna's last known address. The windows were dark, but the curtains were drawn as if to hide the inside from prying eyes. I stepped closer, my breath misting in the cool night air. Something felt off. The front door had been forced open. Splintered wood clung to the frame, and the lock hung uselessly. My father's face grew pale. She's gone, he said softly. I stepped back, heart hammering. But how when? He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Whoever came for her didn't leave anything behind. No sign, no struggle, just gone. I stared at the broken door, the faint outline of the welcome mat beneath it. The way it had been disturbed suggested she had left in a hurry or been taken. My stomach churned, and for a moment I was paralyzed. Then I noticed something on the doorstep, a single photograph taped to the splintered wood. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was Anna, or at least it had been Anna. She looked older, maybe 25, but her eyes were unmistakable, wide, haunted, alert. Someone had written across the bottom in black marker, "You're next." I dropped the photo. My fingers trembled uncontrollably. My father grabbed it, staring at it for a long time in silence. "They know you're here," he said finally. "They always do." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees and carrying a faint metallic scent. I shivered, not just from the cold. "Why? Why me?" I whispered. "Because you remember," he said. "They thought they erased it all. But you weren't supposed to be able to trace the others. You were the anomaly." I looked up at him, trying to process the weight of it all. 7 children, taken, observed, controlled. And now, one missing again. Anna's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. We moved carefully inside the house. The place was sparse, a single sofa, a coffee table, and a small kitchen to the side. Nothing appeared out of place, yet everything screamed that someone had been there recently. A faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, masking something else underneath. Antiseptic, maybe blood, maybe nothing at all. On the kitchen counter, we found a small notebook. open to a page filled with frantic handwriting. My father picked it up and read aloud. "They're coming. I can feel it. I can't stay. They'll erase me. They'll erase us all. If anyone finds this to run." My stomach dropped. Anna had known the threat was coming. She had tried to warn someone, anyone. I ran my fingers over the words, the shaking almost unbearable. My father's hand rested on my shoulder, steadying me. "She left a trail," he said. "A breadcrumb. She wants you to follow it." I looked around the dimly lit kitchen. The walls were bare except for a single painting, an abstract swirl of gray and black. But in the corner of the frame, barely noticeable, was a small symbol scratched into the wood, a triangle enclosing a circle. I recognized it immediately. Eden's mark. "They're close," my father said quietly. "We need to move. Now." I nodded, my resolve hardening. We couldn't stay in Keller's Point. Not with them watching. Not with Anna already gone. We packed what we could into a backpack, the notebook, the photograph, and a few essentials from the kitchen. Every creak of the floor sounded like an alarm in my ears. As we stepped back into the night, I looked toward the horizon. The town was quiet, deceptively calm. But I knew better. The people behind Project Eden were everywhere, always a step ahead, always watching. And yet, for the first time, I felt something else, purpose. Anna Rhodes had left a trail, a breadcrumb path leading to something bigger, to answers, to the other children, to the truth about Project Eden. We followed the dim glow of the streetlights toward the edge of town, where the forest swallowed the road and the shadows grew thick. Somewhere out there, Anna was waiting, or at least, her disappearance was pointing us toward the next clue. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the next step could either save her, or lead me straight into the same trap that had swallowed her. The night closed in around us, dense and cold. Every step we took echoed like a heartbeat in the darkness. And somewhere in the shadows, I felt it, a presence, watching, calculating, waiting. They were close, and they weren't going to let me reach Anna without a fight. The forest outside Keller's Point felt alive as we stepped into it. Shadows stretched long between the pines, and every rustle of leaves made me flinch. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine resin. My father moved ahead, silent, like a predator navigating his territory. I followed closely, my heart hammering with a mixture of fear and anticipation. We were tracing Anna's trail, starting with the small markings she had left in the notebook. Lines connecting names, dates, and locations, cryptic but intentional. Whoever had taken her knew she was trying to communicate something, and every step we took brought us closer to understanding. The path led us to a narrow stream. My father stopped, peering across the water. "The bridge washed out," he said quietly. "We'll have to wade through." The water was icy, biting at my ankles, seeping through the fabric of my shoes. Every step made my muscles tense. I could hear faint footsteps on the other side, though it was impossible to tell if they were real or just echoes carried by the forest. We emerged on the other side, soaked and shivering, and my father crouched behind a fallen log, scanning the shadows. "There," he whispered, pointing to a faint light flickering between the trees. "She left a signal. Someone's alive, or was, very recently." We moved carefully toward it, every branch snapping underfoot sounding like a gunshot. The light came from a small cabin tucked deep in the woods, barely visible through the thick undergrowth. Smoke rose from a chimney, thin and steady, the smell of burning wood drifting toward us. My father held up a hand. "Stay quiet. We don't know who's inside yet." I pressed myself against a tree, the rough bark biting into my palms. My stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and hope. This could be Anna, or it could be one of Eden's agents waiting for us. We circled the cabin, scanning for any signs of movement. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, faint shadows shifted. My father gestured for me to stay back while he crept forward. I held my breath, straining to hear anything. Then I heard it, a soft, desperate whisper. "Claire, please." My heart stopped. I rushed forward without thinking, tripping over a root, but my father caught me. We slipped inside the cabin together. Anna Rhodes was there, or what was left of her composure. She was tied to a chair, her wrists bruised and raw. Her eyes were wide, wild with fear, but when she saw me, they softened slightly. "Claire," she whispered, voice trembling. "Is that really you?" I nodded, rushing to her side. "Yes, it's me. We're going to get you out." She shook her head frantically. "No, you don't understand. They'll know. They'll know I spoke to you." My father moved quickly, cutting the ropes with a small knife. Anna's hands were raw, and she winced, but she didn't resist as we pulled her to her feet. "They came for me last week," she said in a hushed voice. "I barely got away, but I left the notebook. It has everything. If you follow it, you'll find the others, you'll find the truth." I glanced at my father. "Others?" She nodded. "They've been keeping tabs on all of us. 7 of us. Every step we take, they're there, watching, waiting. Some of us haven't made it." My stomach tightened. "Then we need to move," I said, "before they come back." Anna nodded, and we slipped out of the cabin into the night. The forest was dark, silent, except for the crunch of our footsteps and the distant hoot of an owl. Every shadow felt like it could be hiding someone, every rustle of leaves a warning. We reached a clearing and paused to catch our breath. My father looked at us, his face grim. "They know we're here," he said. "They'll be coming soon. We have to decide. Do we run, or do we make a stand?" I clenched my fists. We can't hide anymore. We have to find the others. We have to end this. Anna swallowed, nodding slowly. "There's a safe house north of here, near the old mill. It's abandoned now, but it's the only place we can regroup. If we can make it there, I can show you what I've been tracking." The night air pressed in around us, heavy with tension. Somewhere in the shadows, I knew Eden's agents were closing in. But for the first time, I felt a spark of determination, a fire that refused to be extinguished. We moved cautiously, shadows among shadows, hearts pounding in sync with the night itself. Every step was a risk, every sound a potential alarm. And yet, the thought of finally reconnecting with Anna, the first of the children, gave me a strange sense of hope. Somewhere ahead, in the darkness, the first faint lights of the mill appeared. But before we could reach it, a loud snap rang out behind us, a branch breaking underfoot. I froze. Anna grabbed my arm, whispering, "They're close. Run." We broke into a sprint, the forest blurring around us, leaves whipping our faces. Behind us, the sound of pursuit grew louder, boots pounding, voices shouting, the unmistakable metallic glint of weapons catching moonlight. And in that instant, I realized that Eden wasn't just a shadow from my past. They were here, hunting us, and this chase had only just begun. The forest seemed to close in around us as we ran, branches whipping against our faces, our breath ragged and visible in the cold night air. Behind us, the sound of pursuit was relentless, snapping twigs, shouts, the metallic click of weapons. I could hear Anna's ragged breathing beside me, my father's urgent commands cutting through the chaos. Finally, the outline of the abandoned mill appeared through the trees. Its silhouette was jagged against the moonlight, dark windows like empty eyes staring at us. The structure groaned softly in the wind, giving the impression that it had been abandoned for decades. Yet I could feel it, a strange, tense energy, as if the building itself was aware of our approach. Inside, my father hissed, grabbing Anna and pulling her toward the rusted side door. We slipped in just as a beam of flashlight cut through the tree-line where we had just been. The sound of pursuit halted abruptly at the edge of the forest. For a moment, the only sound inside the mill was the echo of our footsteps across the wooden floor, the groan of metal beams, and our own labored breathing. The vast space was dark, but moonlight filtering through shattered windows revealed a maze of machinery, conveyor belts, and storage crates. Dust motes swirled in the air, disturbed by our sudden intrusion. "We need to move quickly," my father whispered, scanning the shadows. "Eden knows we're here. This place may be abandoned, but it's been used before.